Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth-running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the information on our last episode, Combating Information Overload to Make Better Decisions. If you were unable to join us and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on our YouTube and Facebook pages, as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. If you'd like to receive notifications on when podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. I can hardly believe I have recorded 200 episodes. In another podcast, I'm going to talk about how the podcast began and even talk about my business and how that began. But today I wanted to share some of my favorite guests and topics that we've had. And note that this began actually back in 2019. So some of them will be clips from when I started many years ago, and some of them will be more recent. So I hope you enjoy today's episode and give me feedback on other things you would like to hear for future episodes. So some of my favorite guests have been people that I have met through, whether it's networking events, it's people I use for my own company, and just, some friends that I've made along the way, as well as some people who've just reached out to me, found out about the show and wanted to be guests. So let me just give you a little bit of information about my first clip that I wanted to share. So Chelly Campbell, I met years ago at a networking event, and she would be talking about how to build wealth, especially as women. And she would talk about 3 different kinds of personalities. She would say there was the dolphins, the sharks, and the tuna. And we did talk about that in our episode. But for the clips that I have to share with you today, I wanted to have you listen to what she said is one of the traps that entrepreneurs have, or just, people in general that are not necessarily doing the best they can for themselves financially. And that's not charging enough for your service. So let's take a look.
Well, once they budget, then we have, some other things that could potentially keep them from making the money they want. So what is the trap that business owners actually fall into that keeps them from making more money?
Well, there's a lot of traps, of course, but the one that comes to mind right now is not charging enough for your service.
Mm-hmm.
I had a client who was in the legal field, and she works with a lot of attorneys. And I've been knowing her for 20 years, her and her husband, and they were in their 60s now and wanting to really put a lot of money away for retirement. And I said, well, by the way, what are you charging? And she was charging $3.50 an hour. And I said, is that the going rate today? When was the last time you raised your rates? She said, well, I don't really know, and I know that I haven't raised my rates in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, go do the research and call me back. So she calls me back the next day. She goes, okay, I found out that the going rate in my industry now is $550 an hour, and I haven't raised my rates in 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Well, I don't know if you are finding this, but I think there's 2 reasons why that happens sometimes too. And one of them is, I think sometimes we don't necessarily think we can easily raise those rates because there's going to be pushback, from the customers or things like that, or number 2, someone has said, maybe you had a prospect and, you talk to them and like, oh, that's too much. I don't want to pay for that. So then we're doubting necessarily what our pricing maybe should be. And it's just, we have to have confidence, and I'm the same way sometimes, but we have to have confidence that the service we're offering is valuable and is worth, being paid for.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you a couple of things. One of my mentors early on, Patty DeDominic, who's a multi-million-dollar business, and she said to me, I was talking about raising the price of my bookkeeping service, and I was nervous about it. And she says, whenever you're going to raise your prices, raise them a lot. Because people will complain about it if it's $5 or $25. And you'll lose some people. But you'll work fewer hours and make the same money working for the people who stayed. And then you'll accumulate better clients who have more money who think your fees are just totally fine.
Right.
So the problem is when you have a group of clients, you're comfortable with the price and they're comfortable with the price, and now you're going to stretch and you're going to raise your price. Well, all these current customers don't want to see a raise in price, so there's pushback, right? But the new client is maybe going to go, oh, is that all? That's a perfect price. I'm happy to pay that.
Right.
So another one of my mentors said, if 40% of your clients aren't complaining about the price, you're not charging enough.
I was just going to say, I'd been told at one point, too, if you're not getting no's, and almost everyone who's coming to you is signing on, then probably your pricing is too low. So that's a good point.
Okay, and her next little tip that she had for us were 3 different rules that she has. Do what makes money first, sooner, and later. People need to know, like, and trust you.
So what are the 3 rules for business time management that would ensure profitability?
Okay, I have 3 rules. 1, do what makes money first. 2 is do what makes money soon. And 3 is do what makes money later. But in any case, be doing the stuff that makes money.
Right.
It's like administrivia bogs everybody down, and we want to have the perfect paper, and all the social media posts and all of that. The money isn't in that stuff. A woman sent me this morning, a 2-page outline of who she was, how she got involved in her industry, and what the benefits of her industry were. And she said, could you tell me why I've never made a single sale from this document? And I said, oh, honey, documents don't sell. Your business card doesn't sell. Your brochure doesn't sell. Your website doesn't sell either. What sells is you. And people have to know you, see you, watch you, talk to you. Now, there's some really great advertising out there that can make people investigate, and some people will buy from that, but it's a very small percentage. The big percentage of people buy from you because they like you, they trust you, they believe in you, and they think you care about them. You cannot express how much you care about them through a letter or a pamphlet or a brochure. You have to be talking to a person.
Right.
So I built my business just from networking, going out and meeting people and talking with people and calling them up later. Saying, hi, tell me more about you. How can I refer you business? Who are you looking for?
Moving on to my second guest, Deanne Chase is an attorney with the Chase Law Group. I've used her for my own business services, and I reached out to her to have a discussion on business entrepreneurship and some of the things that you need to know to be legally compliant. And let's listen into the first tip that she had for us, discussing bylaws and meeting minutes.
So a corporation needs to have bylaws, stock certificates, and needs to have annual meetings of shareholders and directors, and significantly, they need to document those meetings by keeping meeting minutes that evidence the fact that they held those meetings. And so a lot of people don't do that, and the reason the minutes matter is that if someone sues the small business owner trying to what's called pierce the corporate veil for failure to comply with those formalities, the failure to keep those meeting minutes and the appropriate documentation is often an easy way for someone trying to sue the small business owner to pierce through the corporate structure and get through their personal assets.
Right. Well, of course, it's important to do whatever is required to stay within compliance so you keep that protection. But I do want to make sure people realize that what we're sharing today is just general information too. So they really need to make sure that they're talking one-on-one with their professional advisor as well to figure out what's best for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They need to be talking with their tax advisors to know that their taxes are particular for them. And similarly, they need to be speaking with their own legal counsel. This is for educational and information purposes only.
The next tip that she talks about is on the entity types for liability protection.
I mean, there's all kinds of entity types, and you just mentioned a couple of them, but can you actually say what entity types there are overall?
Yes, so the primary entity types primarily for small business owners are the LLC, limited liability company, and a corporation. And there are some professionals such as dentists, veterinarians, chiropractors, physical therapists, and so on that cannot practice their profession through an LLC. So they actually need to be formed as a professional corporation and comply with their state board requirements. But the main options are LLC or corporation, and my recommendation in most instances is for the LLC.
Jimmy Martin is someone I met through the Torrance Chamber when I was a member. And when I needed an insurance broker, I reached out to him, and he has since helped me with the multiple types of insurances that I need in my own business. So I reached out to him and asked him to come on and discuss the different types of insurance that a business needs to have protection. And so one of the first tips he's talking about is beware of scammers. Well, and another line of insurance that is important as well as data breach, and we've heard about people's emails being hacked, or the big corporations or medical company information being hacked. So, is data breach important just for the big companies that seem like they're the targets, or should little companies be concerned about that too and have that coverage? What's your recommendation for that data breach coverage?
If you asked me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'd say, the Targets of the world or Walmarts. I mean, those are the guys that got to be worried. But I hate to say, I feel like a doomsday. Everything I'm telling you here as a small business, you got to watch out for everything. But yeah, it's now becoming a big problem for small businesses. I mean, I think hackers are starting to target those that maybe aren't as seasoned in protecting their data. They can gain easier access, so they're going for it. You might have the big organizations. No matter how hard you try and protect what you have, these hackers seem to find a way in. But I think they're finding, and stats are showing that some of these small businesses are just kind of caught, with their pants down, not really kind of being concerned about this stuff. And we're seeing it. I mean, the biggest claims right now are coming from a ransomware standpoint, which is if they can kind of access your system and then basically hold you hostage. Whether they can shut down the cloud that you're on, or shut down your terminals until you pay them money to make them go away. And that they also say social engineering, if you can believe it. I mean, these they put together these emails so and so, they're the CFO of another company, wired me this money for this trade. You kind of seem to find a way to monitor what you're doing, and they get people to take the bait. As crazy as it sounds, it happens so much. It's one of the top 2 claims. But yeah, so that's just a whole other realm, and COVID's really enhancing the
for sure
the need to carry this stuff. Yeah, because they are talking. More people are working electronically, remotely. Human error and clicking on links and starting viruses in your computer is the number one way they grant access to your computer, and they're getting people to do it. So unfortunately, small businesses are being targeted now, and I guess you could say it's not. Everybody should have it, but it's a luxury in a sense. It comes at a cost to have the coverage, but it's just becoming as important as general liability these days in many ways. They can shut you down and for good if you're not careful.
Right. Well, even emails that we used to get, and you'd be like, oh, there's tons of spelling errors, or it's obviously, it's coming from a different email address. It's not a valid email address, but it seems like things are getting more sophisticated. And I know I'd heard a story recently where somehow these hackers actually got the bank information that they use, and even knew the person that was their main banker's name. but just made like one spelling error in it. But it was, like you said, one of those wire requests, and it looked completely valid. But the employee just happened to notice like that one spelling error, and then went to the CFO and said, hey, did you really want me to like wire this to the bank? And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So thankfully, like, they were safe. But it just seems like they're getting more information or know exactly what you're doing. Like they know more of your normal day-to-day stuff too. So it's not as obvious when something comes in that's fraudulent. So we really have to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that we're talking about this. I mean, even from a personal standpoint, and here we are recording this right here before Christmas. I bought some gifts I've been buying gifts online. I got an email, I think like 2 days ago. It said it was from Nordstrom, and here, claim your $15 voucher coupon or something. And I'm like, wow, it looked like everything looked totally legit. And then I looked at the URL on it, and I noticed it was like www.cie.nord, and I just right there, it's just like, you just kind of have to be really wary of like what you're clicking on. It sounded kind of too good to be true. And yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, it can catch you with you just put your guard down, and one click of an inappropriate link and can cause havoc.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely ramping up right now and becoming and I'll tell this story. I think I told this one on our prior discussion, but even not a very big client of ours, you only have 6-7 employees, but they got a ransomware situation where someone got into their system, basically shut them down. They said, we demand X amount of dollars, or you're going to be crippled and paralyzed. And they got into some of their clients' information as well. Luckily, they had $1 million cyber liability policy. Right on the spot, it paid $300,000 in ransom. But that was not all. They already had gotten into the system. After that ransom is paid and trying to get the hackers out of there, then you have to go through all the process of recuperating your data, buttoning up. These kind of like employment practices policies have like the added resources of a HR component.
Right.
Of cyber policies are not just you don't just buy the policy to pay damages. They actually have a team of IT professionals that kind of patch your systems. If there are parties that were affected by the breach, they have to help, they send out notices, pay their credit monitoring.
Right.
Sometimes it's a bad PR situation for companies, and they need to have a PR team to kind of put out the damage of your business got hacked. So there's a lot of, after the hack happens, it's a long process of getting back to normal again. And that particular client, I think they had $1 million policy, but at the end of the day, the claim itself, I think, was a $1.3 million claim, and they still had to come out of pocket. So, I mean, it just goes to show you don't have to be a big fish like a Target or a Walmart. I mean, if you're exposed and they can find you, I mean, they'll find a way to. It's hard to believe that there's a $1 billion industry on there, and how they're able to get money like this through the cyber cryptocurrencies and stuff. But it happens, and it's an unfortunate part of the world we live in right now.
The next tip that he has is on the types of coverage that you would need to have. Well, I know you were just talking about like coverage amounts too. So can you maybe just explain like what a typical business, a small business owner, might want for that coverage versus like a larger amount too? Because sometimes I think that's just confusing. Like, how do I know how much coverage I really need?
Great question. And it would be nice if we had some calculator to know exactly what my future risk is going to be. By default, I guess you could say the standard limits that most carry, and what you'll see in most contracts would be like say $1 million in coverage for general liability, errors and omissions. But sometimes companies, like large organizations that are continuously hiring consultants and whoever is doing the job, they have this kind of cookie cutter template of you must carry this, that, and everything else. I mean, sometimes they're outrageous. You'll see insurance requirements. I need you to carry $5 million in liability, $10 million in cyber. We find too, I mean, those insurance requirements are very negotiable. I mean, if it depends, it's entirely what kind of scope of work you're doing for an organization or what line of business you're in. We'll get calls a lot of times saying, hey, Jimmy, here's my 3-page Word document of all the insurance I need to carry for this contract. Start peeling the onion back, and hey guys, I give a lot of advice saying, maybe you don't have any employees. You shouldn't have to carry work comp. It's not required by law. Why would it be required in this contract? I think a lot of times people can take that preliminary advice, go back to the person that's requiring certain amounts of coverage, and it's always negotiable. But I'd say like $1 million policies are usually the standard, you know, and then that goes for general liability, professional liability, but you know, you're doing larger jobs or projects, or you're dealing with more sensitive situations. Maybe the job that you're doing has a lot of sensitive information, and you know, they want you to carry 10 million in cyber. I mean, there's no negotiation at times, but $1 million is kind of like the I guess the norm.
Okay.
What you see in recontracts and what most carry, and you see it a lot in general liability. 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate. That just means in any one claim, the most that a carrier would pay out is $1 million. Aggregate means the most in a policy year. So you could have 3 claims for like 500,000. You're still under that 2 million aggregate for the year. So it's kind of a common 1 million, 2 million limits that you see a lot and people ask about. So
the next guest I met years ago, probably at least 10 years ago. We had joined a mastermind, and it was the first time that we were all meeting, and she was just launching her business, and she was teaching people how to use LinkedIn to build relationships. And since then, she has had many platforms that she has used, whether it was Facebook, even promoting again on LinkedIn, which is her main one. And as I have seen her grow, she has just blossomed into an amazing entrepreneur. She was even invited to help somebody who was going into Africa to help them with their social media. And so she had an amazing trip, and it was all covered as a business, but because she is an expert with social media. And so let's listen into some of the tips that she has. The first tip is be you. And I know sometimes people feel they're comparing themselves to other people and saying, well, I'm not as good at this as they are, whether it's even their own services they provide. Maybe they're newer and they're not feeling, you know, as capable as somebody else, or maybe they're just thinking like they have, you know, this many thousand followers and I've got 300, you know, and we've heard the term imposter syndrome. So what would you tell listeners in terms of the imposter syndrome and what should they think about it?
I think that is probably one of the most fascinating things that I deal with today in my mind, because we've seen, first of all, like you said earlier, social media came and we weren't really sure what to do. And we tried to follow some other people and we tried to do it their way, but it was their way. That's the key. It was their way. But then on social media, you have all these memes and all these images and all these quotes that say, be yourself, be your boss, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then they say, do it my way. Well, it doesn't work for us. You have your way, I have my way. Now, are there processes to follow and stuff? Absolutely. But I think the biggest thing is to tell people, do it your way. Know, again, when you know why you're out there and what your purpose is, it's much easier to not let that. And don't go to those places where you might feel that insecurity. We have a huge suicide problem in this country today and in the world because of social media. What a tragedy that we have done that to our young people. So I think understanding who you are, what you stand for, and not getting sidetracked by those other people, because just because they have 1 million followers, that doesn't mean they're happy. That and again, you know, so I think it's like a roller coaster. You have to say who I am, and I'm gonna do it my way.
Right. I think that's so true. And like I said, be authentic, just be yourself. And, you know, that's the thing is people are going to end up doing business with people they like anyway. So you want to be you, right? So they get to like you and not who you're pretending to be. Okay. The second tip that she talks about is the personal side of social media. Well, and I know when social media was starting years ago too, I think a lot of us felt we had to keep like business and personal separate, you know, so I have, you know, my affordable bookkeeping business page. And then of course I have my personal page, and I didn't show as much on the personal. Every once in a while I still do, but do you think that's as much of an issue now, or can you still kind of involve some of the personal things on your business page and still be seen professionally?
I can remember, and I'll share this here, that Candy and I were in the same coaching program with George Chudicup. And I will say, I can remember sitting around that room and saying to people, and people actually not arguing, but disagreeing with me, there's no difference between personal and professional. That ship sailed and it's sunk way off the coast. So for people who think there's a difference, I humbly say that's not true, because people want to know you as a person.
Right.
They want to know you. We always hear know, like, trust, but I think they want to see that side of you as a personal thing. And again, I never post anything that I wouldn't want the world to see anyway. And I know
Right.
you don't either. So,
Right.
so I think the more you can combine that, the better off you'll be as far as on digital space. So people get to know who you are.
Amanda Bedell was a recent guest. She reached out to me and set up an interview. I had never met her before. And as we chatted, we found out we were both the alumni of the 10,000 Small Business Program. She was in a different program, of course, in a different state. But we found that we had both graduated from the program. And so that was just a connection that we had. But she was really talking about the 3 lessons that she learned from the ashes of her business failure. And I wanted her to discuss what she had experienced so that passing that along to you could also help you be aware of what could happen and how to avoid it. So her first tip that she shares is on the 80-20 rule. I was gonna say, well, now, that was the first tip we were talking about, just having some people around you. So what about your second tip for someone who's facing these challenges?
Yeah, so let's see. Um, the 80-20 rule is where I'll go next. So, um, we've probably all heard of the 80-20 rule in that, 20% of the time you can eat chocolate when we're dieting. But what does that mean in business? So what it means in business is that 20% of what you do each day is generating 80% of your income, or 20% of your customers are generating 80% of your income. So depending on what kind of business you're in. So it doesn't matter if you are in a brick and mortar, an e-commerce business, B2B, B2C, the 20% remains the same. This is a through thread. Doesn't matter about the industry, but there are 5 pieces of the business that you need to focus on that make up that 20%. And they're your foundations, leads, conversions, transactions, and profits. Let me go through each one real quick. So foundations, that's your policies and your procedures, your business model, and how you're unique. Your unique selling proposition. It can also be your market dominating position or brand promise. Those terms are all the same, even though marketers don't want you to know that. It doesn't have to be a full sentence. It can be a fragment. But how are you different? And who do you serve? That's your foundation. And then leads, that's the fuel of any business. So how are people getting to know you? How are you building the relationship? From the conversion side, this is where we get into vertical growth rather than this wide, casting the net wide. How are we getting the right people to convert and rather than chasing the latest social media trend or the newest, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever they are. Okay. Transactions. How many times are people buying from you? I tell people, your customers are on, or if you're a service-based business, your clients are with you for a couple rounds on the Ferris wheel, and then they pop off. Why do they pop off? How do you scoop them back up? How many times do people buy from you? What else serves them? Are there ways to partner with organizations or other businesses that fully support them on both sides of your business? When someone buys from you once, they're more likely to buy from you again. And the last one is profits. And this is where I failed, which was the pricing strategies and ensuring that your overhead is being considered into that pricing strategy, your costs, and looking at ways of bundling opportunities so that you can build something that is sustainable for you.
Her second tip is asking the question, is your business viable? Story. So I know you have some tips that you want to even give, about this whole situation. So I'd love for you just to talk about, what are the things you really want to share? Because I don't necessarily know the right questions to ask per se.
Sure.
So what is it you want to talk about to help those in that challenging space?
Well, just to dovetail on what you were talking about, creating that tribe of trusted people and advisors is one of the things that I have on the list of the tips that I want to make sure that people kind of go away with today. So when I look in that review mirror and reflect on that really hard year, I'm reminded of a business friend named Tim. So Tim, we had met at Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. This is a really great entrepreneurial program. He had a large HVAC company that he ran for 25 plus years. I just talked to him the other day, and he is out. He's been 2 weeks out of his business. So he graciously led me through many conversations where I felt like I was just in a circle of just in a cycle, if you will, of should I stay? Should I go? Should I, buy a business partner out? I was in a business partner relationship there. And it seemed like we were having the same conversation year after year. So it was on that August day that I alluded to earlier that I was on the phone with him, and I was sitting in a Seattle park, and Tim said something that stopped me in my tracks. And he said to me this: why are you fighting so hard for this when you have so much more to do?
Wow. That's insight.
Until that point, I had no idea I had something more to do. So really what he saw in me, he saw something more in me that I couldn't even see in myself. So that point around having someone that you can ride that roller coaster with, I know the entrepreneurial roller coaster analogy is overused, but it is so real. And when we're in that high, it's like we can do no wrong. It can be very addicting. That's what is addicting about entrepreneurship. But in that low, you don't know where to turn. You got to know who's in your corner and who can really see the message when you can't, because you can't see the message inside the bottle. That's what I tell my clients now. You can't see your message inside the bottle because you're in it every day. And so you don't really see what's happening. So you need someone that you can fully open up to and ask that question of, why are you fighting so hard for this? Are you able to do other things that you can enjoy? Are you living in chaos? This might sound like I'm trying to say, oh, exit your company. And that actually isn't what I'm meaning. But is this the company that is right for you?
Right.
Or are you kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall, trying to make something work that you need to wake up and say, this isn't working for me? Is it a viable business? Can it run without you? If you've got a business that can't run without you, you've got a hobby and a job.
Well, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and that you enjoyed hearing some of these tips from the guests that I have had in the past. And I hope that you will go back and listen to the full episodes to gain the insight on the topics that we discussed. And links are in the show notes. And if you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to me at media@abandp.com. And I hope you can join us for our next episode, Why Everyone Should Be Able to Recite Your Mission and Purpose. And please remember, you can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. You can find the podcast posted on multiple favorite podcast platforms, including Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And would you please share our show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? I'd really appreciate your support. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.